Of our top story here on Al Jazeera. There are reports that Gaddafi's tanks and warplanes have been hitting several towns in Libya. These are some of the latest pictures from Bin Jawad. Rebels say they're having to deal with aerial bombardment and have sustained serious injuries. The head of Libya's opposition National Council says the Libyan leader must stop the bombing and leave the country within 72 hours. However, a different spokesman for the council has denied that any negotiations are taking place. Well, as the battle for Libya intensifies, oil production in the country has plummeted. In the rebel-held east, it's down by as much as 90%. Now OPEC is considering boosting output for the first time in 2 years. Alan Fisher has more.
No sign of an end to the fighting in Libya, and that means trouble for the country's oil industry. As Africa's third largest producer, normal output is 1.6 million barrels of oil a day. That's dropped by 2/3 since the uprising against Colonel Gaddafi began, and that's costing the government in Tripoli $100 million a day in revenue. 80% of the country's oil sits in the Sirte Basin and is right on the battle line between pro and anti-Gaddafi forces. The El Bouri oil field off Libya's western coast is the largest producing oil field, and output there's been hit. The Al Hamra fields and the isolated Merzag Basin in the south are still producing, but key foreign workers have left and they make up 10% of the oil industry workforce. Once produced, crude oil is piped to the main terminal ports for export. There are 6 terminals, 5 in the east, mostly in rebel hands. Brega has been bombed by the Libyan Air Force as pro-Gaddafi soldiers have been trying to recapture the port. It's not working at the moment. The facility at Zu Eitina was bombed last week. Ras Lanuf isn't working after fierce fighting around there, and there's been fierce fighting around Zawiya, but it's still operating.
There have not been damages to the oil installation, so there is no reason why, if the conflict in Libya ends relatively swiftly, there is no reason why Libya should not resume production. And then, whatever the issue of the conflict, any camp will have interest to increase oil production to get revenues from oil.
Here's the other problem. The fighting means companies are reluctant to send ships into Libyan ports, and even if they do, it's not clear who they should pay, the Gaddafi regime or the rebels. Both sides in the fighting say they will not target oil installations, but that hasn't been enough to protect the industry. According to the latest figures, Italy is the biggest market for Libyan oil, followed by Germany and France. China takes 10%. Europe sucks in more than 2/3 of the output. Losing that supply forces them to look elsewhere, and that drives up prices across the board, making fuel much more expensive for everyone.
That is an anxiety to central bankers who are trying to manage and control inflation, so their reaction to that will be to raise interest rates. The knock-on effect of that could be to throttle down, to choke off what is still a very fragile recovery from the recession.
The fighting in Libya has already pushed the oil price to a 2.5-year high. Fear of unrest across the region could push it even higher. The effects of the uprising now being felt far beyond Libya's borders. Alan Fisher, Al Jazeera.
Army leadership played a decisive role in ensuring a smooth transition of power in Egypt and Tunisia. However, in Libya, despite some desertions, the army is firmly under Gaddafi's control. But will the loyalty continue amid reports that Gaddafi is trying to strike a deal with the rebels? Mohammed Shakir investigates.
The military in both Egypt and Tunisia are institutionalized with long traditions. Despite being led by former military officers, both countries kept their armies at a distance from politics and away from the internal security. Both regimes relied on a separate internal security apparatus, born, bred and trained to quell opposition, while the armies stood by, keeping their hands clean. Armies in both countries have direct and strong links with the outside world through military aid, training and joint exercises. This is not the case with the Libyan army.
I haven't ordered the bullets yet. When I order the use of force, then we will be up to it, and it will burn everything.
In his speech on February 22nd, Gaddafi seemed confident of the loyalty of his forces. But was he referring to the army or to the internal security forces? In Libya, there are no distinct lines separating the responsibilities of the elite army units from the security brigades. They both have, as their main objective, the protection of the regime. Army elite brigades are closely connected with Gaddafi's sons. Some even carry their names. those who serve in these units receive better pay and more benefits. They are also chosen directly from the Gaddafi tribe in northern Libya, and those directly linked to the ruler's clan, as well as those known for publicly showing loyalty to Muammar Gaddafi. For decades, their privileged status has made them the envy of the rest of the army, who have deliberately been kept weak and demoralized. In the early days of the Libyan uprising, signs of the army's fragmentation were obvious, with military pilots fleeing to Malta with their Mirage fighter jets. But the strongest elements of Libya's army have a vested interest in defending the regime, and the majority do not follow the Egyptian or Tunisian models of military neutrality. So sure of their support, when Gaddafi's son, Saif al-Islam, addressed the nation 2 weeks ago, he warned of a brutal civil war, should those who are demanding the fall of his family not back down.
It will be a civil war. We will go back to the 1936 civil war. We will be killing each other in the streets. Libya is not Tunis or Egypt.
Now, with the latest reports about a possible deal for a safe exit for the Gaddafis, those loyal military commanders may feel betrayed. And unless the deal includes some kind of amnesty for them, it may be that they too start questioning their loyalty to the Gaddafi regime. Mohammed Shuqair, AlJazeera.
And staying with Libya, the commander of American and NATO forces in Afghanistan, General David Petraeus, may be feeling a little embarrassed. He didn't expect his joke about Libya would be heard over the aircraft engine noise as he greeted the visiting US Secretary of State, Robert Gates. The two men shake hands, and Petraeus says, "Welcome back, sir. Flying a little bigger plane than normal. Are you going to launch attacks on Libya or something?" And Gates replies, "Yeah, exactly." Now, just some breaking news for you getting within the last few minutes from Yemen. From the capital, Sana'a, we're getting reports that security forces have opened fire on protesters who've been camping outside Sana'a University. Now, you'll remember that there have been demonstrations over a number of weeks for people who are unhappy with the ruler, Ali Abdullah Saleh, and he's been there for 32 years. They've been trying to put pressure on him to stand down. He's resisted those calls and has said he'll not stand for power after 2013. They obviously want him to leave a lot sooner than that. And we're getting reports this evening that security forces who'd surrounded people who were camping outside Sana'a University during the day have now fired into the crowd, and a number of people have been injured. And we're going to try and get a bit more information for you on that, and just as soon as we do, we'll bring it to you. Hundreds of people have taken to the streets of Abidjan in Côte d'Ivoire. Some were protesting against the killing of women shot by soldiers during another march last week. Others are demonstrating against the disputed leader Laurent Gbagbo. Mohamed Ado has more.
Anger on the streets of Abidjan. In the city's Abobo neighborhood, the heart of Alassane Ouattara's support base, an anti-Gbagbo protest is on. Armed with brooms and sticks, the protesters chant songs of defiance.
Laurent Gbagbo should leave today.